Hey everyone, this is Matt. This is another Activate tutorial for creating games in GameSalad. Today's game is called Solarball. This is a beginner level tutorial, but it's verging into intermediate level tutorial territory, so I recommend not starting with this one. Start with Drop Cycle or something like that. This is a video companion to the written PDF tutorial, so feel free to check that out for a slower pace and a little more detail. You'll need the GameSalad software and the file of resource files that you can download from the website, and make sure to play the game on the website as well. This is Solarball here on screen, so let's take a look at it. I'm controlling the panel at the bottom of the screen. I've got the Solarball bouncing around the screen, and I don't want to let it fall off the bottom of the screen, or otherwise it is game over, which is a terrible thing. So you've probably played a game like this before. It's pretty simple, but the simplicity hides a few neat tricks that we're going to be using in the creation of this game. So without any further ado, let's get started. First thing you want to do is open up a blank project in GameSalad, give it a name, and choose a platform. I'm going to choose GameSalad Arcade. You can give it a description and instructions if you like, and then click on the Scenes tab and double click on Initial Scene. So here we are in the scene view, and the first thing that we'll want to do is to import the images that we're going to use. So here in the library in the lower left, click on the Images tab, and then open up that folder of resource files, and you should have some images inside like this. We'll need all of them, so highlight all of them and then drag them into the space in GameSalad. And when you do, they'll be imported, so now we can use them. But they need to be attached to containers that we can manipulate in GameSalad, and those are called actors. So we can easily create actors for these images by choosing all of them and then dragging them into the Actors tab. Now we have actors. And before we add them, let's change the background color to be a nice sky blue. So the way we do that is to go up to the inspector and click on Scene, and then click on this color option. Make sure this middle tab is selected for color palettes. I'm going to choose the crayons palette and then choose sky. There it is. You can close out of this and click the game tab again. Okay, let's add the panel to our scene. So we can drag that actor into the scene. I'm going to place it partially off screen so there's a little more vertical room to work with. You'll see that that just means I don't see the bottom half when I run the game, so that's fine. And we want to make the panel move, so let's start with that. We need to open up the panel's behavior, so we can double click on panel. And then it has no behavior yet, but we can change that by going to the library and clicking on the behaviors tab. And we want to move the panel with the arrow keys. So the first thing is to detect if an arrow key is pressed. So to do that, we can create a rule. And we need to set the conditions, so we'll change mouse position to key, and then click on keyboard to choose our key, and I'll click on the right arrow key. And now I can scroll through the list of behaviors, and they're alphabetized, so you can find move and drag that into the rule. And we have to set a direction and a speed. The direction is measured against the x-axis, which runs from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. So 0 degrees is straight to the right, and that's exactly what we want, so this is fine. And we can just run it like this, and now if I press the right arrow key, you can see that the panel moves to the right, so that's great. And we want to do the same for the left arrow key, so we can actually click this whole rule to select it, and then do edit copy and edit paste. And now we have another copy of it, and we can click keyboard and change this to the left arrow key. And then for the direction, straight to the left is 180 degrees, so I'll type that in. And now, just by making those simple changes, I can move the panel back and forth, left and right, which is awesome. But you'll notice that I can move it off screen, and that's not ideal. We want to keep it on screen. So the simplest way to do that is to have some kind of obstacle that's just outside the bounds of the screen and have the panel collide with that obstacle. So we have this actor here called the wall, and I'll drag a copy of that. And I'll put it here for the moment because we want to set up the collision. So we want to make the panel collide with the wall, and so for that we need to open up the panel's behavior again. And we'll scroll through the behaviors, and up in the C's we have collide. So we can drag that in. I'll just throw it up in the top here. And we have to select the type, so I'll have it collide with the wall. And that just means it should bounce off the wall. So let's try that out. But if we do that, whoa! What just happened? So we had this crazy behavior. I'll do it one more time quickly. where I run into the wall, and what seems to be happening is the wall is doing an absolutely terrible job of stopping movement. It's just flying off into the infinite nothingness, and now our panel thinks that it's Peter Pan, and it's flying around all over the place. I'm just using left and right, but you'll see it's rotating, and as it rotates, left and right changes where it goes. So this is hilarious, but not all that useful for our game. And the reason it's happening is because all of the objects in GameSalad, by default, they have physics properties attached. And this wall, it doesn't know that it's not supposed to move. And so when the panel runs into it, it transfers force into the wall. And the wall just shoots off in the direction of the force. And then it also gives a little bit of force back to the panel, and that makes the panel rotate. So that's not ideal, and we should change that. And that's easy to do. So we can open the wall's behavior, and here in its list of attributes, which control its nature, we can scroll down to the list of physics attributes and expand it with this arrow. And we can scroll through that list, and you'll see there's one called movable, and it's checked. And you can probably guess that if we uncheck that, now the wall should no longer be movable. And we'll see that if we run the game, now we can run into the wall, and it doesn't go anywhere. So that's good. What's not so good is the panel is still rotating. There's nothing stopping the wall from giving some rotation to the panel still. So we should change that too. And we can do that easily as well. But in this case, we need to go into the panel's behavior and scroll through its attributes to physics. And now what we'll choose is fixed rotation, and it's not checked, so we'll check it. And so now if we do that, the wall is an obstacle that the panel can't get past, and the panel doesn't rotate, so that's great. And now that we've done that, we know the wall is working properly, so we can move it outside the bounds of the screen, which you can do by clicking to select it and then use the arrow keys, and you can use shift to make it move faster. So that's very helpful. And I have one there, and then I'll also put one on the other side. Maybe. Great. And now there's no visual difference to the player, but the panel can't get off screen. So that's perfect. But we should think about ahead what the ball is going to do. We want the ball to bounce around the screen as well. And the ball is not just going to approach the edge down here, it's going to be all over the place. So we should actually expand our walls to surround the entire screen, except for the bottom. And what we can do is stretch these walls. So it's hard to tell with this one because it's so small, but you can see if you click the panel, there are these circles. You can drag them to stretch this panel. We can do the same thing with the wall. So you can stretch it, move it over to make sure it's not on screen. Do the same thing with this one. And then we'll need one more across the top. So now we're all set for the ball. So let's add the ball. And I'll drag one in. And now we want the ball to move around, and we want it to bounce off the panel and the walls. So quickly, let's set that up like we would think we should set it up. So we'll give it the move behavior. We'll have it start moving straight down, which is 270 degrees. And then we'll give it 2 instances of collide. We'll have it collide with the wall, and we'll also have it collide with the panel. Now if we run that, you can see there's an immediate problem. Maybe you anticipated it, which is that the ball just pushes the panel right off the screen. And it's exactly the same thing as what happened with the wall. The ball transfers its force to the panel, and the panel doesn't know that it shouldn't get pushed off screen. But we can't make the panel immovable like we did with the wall. Because if we did that, then we couldn't move the panel. And it would cause a few other problems as well that are not really relevant right now. So we have to leave the panel movable, which means that we can't use the ball's move and collide behaviors with respect to the panel. So we have to use a different approach. And what we can do instead is open up the ball's behavior again, and we'll get rid of move, and we'll also get rid of the collision with the panel, although we'll leave the one with the wall, because we still want it to bounce off the wall. The wall's not going anywhere. But what we can do instead is we can use another behavior, which is called change velocity. And change velocity is different than move, because move is constantly telling the object which direction to go and what speed. And change velocity, it just does it a single time, and then it lets the ball or whatever object go and do its own thing. And it has another advantage, which is that we can use it under certain circumstances. So we can drag a copy in, and the first thing we need to do is set a direction. And for the direction, let's go ahead and have it move down again, but we'll make it a random downward direction, so it's not always straight down. And to do that, we can click this letter E to open the expression editor, and then click this arrow to look at the functions we have available. And one of the functions is random, so we can choose that. And now it asks us a range of values that random can pick from. And so for the minimum, I'm going to choose 225. And for the maximum, I'm going to choose 315. And those numbers are 45 degrees to the left and to the right of 270. So they're all in the downward direction, but there's some variety. And now if we run that, we can see by rerunning this that the ball shoots off in an unpredictable direction. So that's a great start. Now, with the speed, if you play the game on the website, you remember that every time the ball bounces off the panel, it picks up speed a little bit. And it also bounces upward in a semi-random direction. So we needed to address both of those concerns. And for the speed, we know that we can't use a fixed speed because it needs to increase. So what we need to do instead is create a whole new attribute that we will control the speed with. And we can do that by clicking this plus button here. And we have to choose the type. So in this case, the speed is a number, and we can choose integer. And now it appears down here as a new attribute, so we can double click on the words and change it to something else like speed. And then for the initial value, which is here, I will set it to 100, which is a nice slow speed. And then finally, we need to select that attribute that we just made up here in the change velocity. This is going to be our initial velocity. And so we can open the expression editor again, but now we can click this other arrow and look through our attributes. And we made this in the ball, so we choose ball, and then double click on speed, and then save that. And now it's the same as before, except that the ball moves much more slowly because it's using that 100 value that we set. So that's great. And now the ball is all set for its first action, but now we need to make it bounce off the panel. And we know that we can't use move or collide. So what we can do instead is create a rule. And in this rule, we'll set a condition and we'll change mouse position to overlaps or collides. And the type will be panel. And now we can specify what happens when it collides with the panel. And the first thing we want to do is increase the speed. So we can do that by using another behavior, which is called change attribute. And we have to choose the attribute to change, and that again is going to be the ball speed. And we'll change it to itself, so we open the expression editor and choose, again, ball speed. But we have this flashing cursor up here, and so we can type times, which is the asterisk, and then 1.1, and save that. And that means that it should take the value of what speed is currently, multiply it by 1.1 so it grows a little bit, and then save that as the new value of speed. And then we need to change the velocity. So we can actually highlight our current change velocity, do edit copy, and then click on this change attribute behavior and do edit paste. And now we've copied the change velocity behavior within the rule. And it's already set to change the velocity speed to our speed attribute, but now that's just increased because of this part. And then for the direction, we don't want it to go downward, we want it to go upward, so we need to edit this. So we can open the expression editor, but we'll change the minimum and maximum values. And straight upward is 90 degrees, so I'll do 45 degrees as the minimum, and 135 as the max. For the same principle as before, 45 degrees on either side. So now when the ball collides with the panel, it should increase its speed and then shoot upward in a random direction with the increased speed. Let's try it. And it works. And we already set it to bounce off the wall, so it's doing that as well. So that's awesome. We should feel proud of ourselves. And to celebrate, we should make a sound effect that plays when it collides with the panel. And to do that is very simple. In the library, there's a Sounds tab, and then you can open up the folder of resource files and look in the Sounds subfolder and find bounce.wave. And we can drag that into GameSalad. And we have to choose how to import it, so we'll choose to import as sound. And now it appears in the library in the Sounds tab. We can play it. And then we can click on behaviors again, and we can find the play sound behavior. Drag that into this rule. And it doesn't matter where in the rule you place it, I'll just put it in the bottom here. And all we need to do is choose which sound, so we'll choose bounce. And now, if we run it, we have the sound effect as well. So that's awesome, go us. Now we can play the game like this, because we have everything that we need, but it's pretty boring. We need some obstacles, so we should add some clouds. And to do that, we'll go back to the scene view, and we can drag the cloud into the scene. And we know that we're going to want the ball to collide off the cloud, so we should remember to open up the cloud and set its physics behavior to be immovable, just like with the wall. So we'll uncheck that. And we also know that because the sun is changing direction sometimes, and it's going to collide with things, it may have rotation problems, just like the panel did when it ran into the wall before. So we'll also open the ball's behavior and go to its physics behaviors, and we'll change it to fixed rotation, just like the panel. So now the ball won't spin, and it'll change direction reliably, which is important. And then finally, we will stretch this cloud, because we want to see if the ball bounces off the cloud. And it's kind of hard to hit right now because it's so small. But you'll notice that when we stretch the cloud, it looks really bad. And that's because the image that covers the cloud is only this wide. And then when we stretch it, we're stretching it horizontally, but not stretching it vertically proportionally, and so the image becomes distorted, and it looks awful. But we don't have to leave it that way. What we can do instead is exploit how the image covers the actor. And we can do that by going to the cloud's behavior. And we can scroll down, but instead of choosing physics, we can choose graphics. And then we can look for horizontal wrap and vertical wrap. And we can change them from stretch to tile. And when we do that, and we go back, it looks so much better, even though it's still one thing, which you can see if you click on it. And what happened is, we changed the settings so that the image gets repeated over and over again to fill the space that the actor takes up. And that's much easier than having to drag lots of copies of the cloud and put them next to each other to make a long cloud. Now we've done it in one. You do have this problem where the image can get cut off, so you may have to adjust the size to deal with that. But this is much simpler, so use that strategy. Tiling is great. And so now let's double check that the ball collides with it. If we can get the ball to actually, let's just make this bigger so we don't have to wait for it to get there. Oh, that's right. And of course, we have to set the ball's collision behavior as well. So open up ball and get another copy of collide and paste that in there with the one for the wall. But now we'll set it to cloud. Let's try this again. And now it bounces nicely off the cloud. So that's great. Now, one thing you have to think about is that this cloud is probably too long, because if the ball ever gets up there between the ceiling and the cloud, it's just going to bounce up there by itself for a long time, and it'll be boring for the player. So we definitely don't want it to be this long. At this point, you should make a basic level layout. I'm going to make one quickly that looks like the one in the web version. These clouds, they're like walls, but you can place them wherever you want, and wherever you place them dramatically changes the gameplay. So this is where you should experiment a little bit, play around with level design, and just make a layout that's interesting for you, preferably more interesting than this one. So I'll go ahead and add these clouds quickly, and then we'll have a copy finished that we can work with. Great, so this is our thrown together level. Yours should be better than this. But now the game is pretty much done at this point, because we have our obstacles and we have those interactions between the balls and the obstacles, and we can bounce it around and so on, except for one thing. One thing is missing, which is that if the ball goes off the screen and we lose, there's no feedback. It doesn't restart the game. It doesn't tell us that we lost. It just sits there, but the ball's never going to come back. And that's awful, so we should do something to fix that. And ideally, what we want is to have some text on screen that tells us the game is over, and then we want to have the game restart. So let's add that in. And the first thing we can do is we need to detect when the ball has gone off the bottom of the screen. And we can do that the same way we prevented the panel from going off the screen, which is check for a collision with an object. But in this case, we'll use a different one than the wall, which is red wall. So you can drag a copy in, and then make it as wide as the scene. In this case, we don't have to worry about collision, making the ball bounce off it and setting it to be immobile. All that matters is that the ball collides with it, and that's game over. So now we can go into the ball's behavior. We're not going to use collide because it's not going to bounce off the wall, but what we can do is create a new rule. And in that new rule, we will check for an overlap or collision with red wall. And what we should do first is have it restart the game. And we'll have it count up to 3 and then restart the game. So we can use the timer behavior, drag that into this rule, and then we can set it to, instead of every, we'll do after, and instead of 5 seconds, we'll do 3 seconds. We also need to check this run to completion button, and that just means as long as the ball collided with the red wall at some point, the timer will go ahead and count up to 3, and then do whatever's inside the timer. And finally, we can add the reset game behavior. So let's try that. So I'll miss the ball. We can still move it, but a few seconds later, it should restart the game. And it does. So that's great. Now the only thing that we're missing is the text. And there is a behavior for that as well, which is called display text. And there's an issue with using it in the ball, and I'm just going to show you what that is by adding the display text behavior. So I'll just change the color to something dark so we can see it easily. And now I'll run the game. And you'll see that the text moves with the ball. And the reason for that is that just like anything else in GameSalad, the text has to be attached to an actor, and its position depends on the actor's position. And that's a problem in this case because the only way the game becomes over is if the ball goes off screen. And if the ball is off screen, then we can't see any text that's attached to it. So we can't use the display text behavior inside the ball itself. We need a different actor that holds still on screen and displays the text. So let's make one. And to do that, we don't have an image in this case. We can just use the plus button to make a new one. And then we can click on the name and we'll change it to game over. And we want it to blend into the background because it's not going to be visible. So we can double click on it, and then in its attributes, click on color. And we can choose the same sky blue color as before, as the sky, because it's going to blend in. And then we can click back and make a copy of it. And we can put it in the center of the screen so the text will be centered. You'll notice it covers over the cloud, or the solar ball. We can fix that by clicking on it, and then right click. Choose send to back. And that simply means that it will appear underneath everything else. So nothing will cover, it won't cover anything. And finally, we can open up the behavior for that actor again, and we can give it the display text behavior. And now we'll change the text to be game over. And then I'll change the color. And now if we run it, oh, well, apparently the game is over already. Like, what is the point of us even playing? We might as well just stop. That's a problem, right? We can't have the text on screen all the time. We only want it to appear when the game is actually over. And the challenge for that is that we identify the game being over by when the ball collides with the red wall. And the game over actor, it doesn't have any way to tell when that is. So we have to have some way to indicate it. And what we can do is we can make another new attribute. But this one won't be associated with a specific actor. This one will be a game level attribute. So make sure that game is chosen as the tab up here, and then click on attributes. And now we'll make a new one. And we'll make what's called a Boolean. And that sounds scary, but a Boolean is just a thing that can be set to either true or false. So you'll see when we create it, it has a checkbox, just like we've already seen. And we can double click on the name and change it to something like game over. And then when this checkbox is not checked, that means its initial value is false. And when it's checked, the initial value is true. And obviously we don't want the game to start off over, so we make sure this is unchecked. And now what we need to do is go back to the actors and then we're going to go into the ball and go down to our rule for when it collides with the red wall. And we'll click on the timer, and we're just going to cut it. So we'll do edit cut, and we'll save it for later, but now it's not inside the rule anymore. And then we're going to use our change attribute behavior again. So drag that in. And this time we're going to change the Boolean that we just made, which we made in game, and there it is, game over. And we'll change it to true. You just have to type that. So now when the ball collides with the red wall, it changes the game over attribute to be true. And then we can back out of that and open up the game over actor, and we can create a rule. But in this case, we won't check for an event. We're going to change this to attribute. And we'll have to choose the attribute. And what we're checking for is if the game over attribute is true. So remember, that's in game and then game over. And yeah, we want to make sure that it's set to true. And then if it's true, then we can click inside and do edit paste. And that pastes in the timer that we cut earlier. We can uncheck run to completion, because once game over is set to true, it's not going to revert to false. So we don't need to worry about running to completion. It will count up to 3. And then finally, we can drag the display text behavior into this rule. So now, the first thing this actor does is it checks if game over is true. And if it is, then it displays the game over text, and it counts up to 3, and then it resets the game. And if we try that, it works. And a few seconds later, it restarts. And that's it. We just finished making our own version of Solarball, so congratulations. We went through a lot of really more advanced techniques in this one, which is why I mentioned that it verges into intermediate territory. So you should feel proud of yourself for all the cool things that we've done. At this point, what you want to do is a couple of things. First of all, your challenge for this tutorial is to work on your level layout, play test it a lot with a lot of people, and make sure that it's fun to play. So tweak the position of the clouds, tweak how many clouds you have, make sure that the ball doesn't get stuck anywhere. Just make sure it's fun to play. And then the other thing you can do is think about how you could improve the game. So for example, a lot of games like this, they'll have some kind of score, or maybe some kind of timer that keeps track of how long you've kept the ball in play, which is a kind of score. Or maybe you could make it so that you can destroy the clouds if you hit them enough, kind of like the game Breakout. Or you could have additional levels that you can reach by accomplishing certain things. So there are a lot of different possibilities for how to improve this. But congratulations for making your own copy of Solarball. Thanks for sticking with a more complex tutorial than the previous ones. You're definitely ready for the intermediate ones, so I encourage you to check those out. There's a lot of cool stuff there. And just in general, enjoy working on your projects and creating games in GameSalad. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.